You're listening to the Australian Hunting and Beyond podcast with Matt, where we talk about hunting, shooting, fishing, camping, and everything else that the great outdoors has to offer. Let's get into it.
All right, if you listen to the podcast, you know one of the big things I'm about is looking after our future going forward. Big thing, we need to be advocates for what we do, and we need to do that not only in a positive light, but we need to make sure that we're getting others involved who support what we do, not necessarily have to hunt, but be okay with what we do due to our actions. And, you know, we need to be thinking about what we can do to make politicians aware that we are a big part of society and that we need to be listened to because we have rights just like everybody else. Sometimes it doesn't feel that way. So tonight I've got Patrick from Shooters Union New South Wales. G'day, mate. Thank you for coming on. Can you tell us a bit about yourself and what you do there?
My name's Patrick. I am a part of the board for the New South Wales side of the Shooters Union. We have a massive national component, but we do break down into the various states, mainly because every state, as you'd all be aware, has various rules and legislations and battles, and it's just too big of a task for one group to solely focus on. So my role currently is the Vice President with the Shooters Union New South Wales branch, and in that, mostly I'm a part of getting involved in the fight to secure the rights of firearms users, but not only firearms users, as our name would suggest, but hunters in general, fishers, four-wheel drivers, pretty much anyone who's outside, we have a link to and a connection to and want to support and are actively supporting at this time.
And you're a bit of a hunter yourself, mate, aren't you?
Absolutely. A mad hunter and fisherman. My success has only, in the last few years, started to ramp up to where it probably should have been many years ago. As we all know, this is a long learning curve recreation. As I've seen with yourself, it's been a journey. But
Too long for me.
But that's what it's about, right? It's a journey for most of us. And for myself, I didn't come from a hunting or fishing background at all. At 16 years old, I picked up a fishing rod. At around about 20, after a stint as a vego, I got a rifle a bow to start with to try and take the ethical route to meat harvesting. And as some of your listeners would be aware, a bow is highly inefficient if you don't know what you're doing. So the rifles became a quick part of what I took a passion in. And not only was that in hunting, but just general practical shooting disciplines as well.
It's so much fun. I reflect on it. I would love to see more rangers do PRS and things like that because I think it would make better hunters shooting from those various positions. And it's one thing I sort of talk about a lot is I love my local range. Great blokes, they do a fantastic job out there. But the problem is that you can't shoot off a tripod or you can't, lay down in prone. You can't do all these different sort of things that we need to do in the field. Shooting off a bench is great, but it does limit the opportunities for you to make it real life situations and get that practice in. So when you have an animal in the crosshairs, that you are as effective as possible. And it's one thing that I think I'd love to just see more of. But hey, that's a different story.
Absolutely, practical shooting's growing and it's gaining popularity. It's just a change in generations and cultures, and that'll be the new normal, like bench rest shooting is eventually.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's and it's everyone that does it loves it, and I get it. I'm happy to travel to do it. So that's one thing that I'm really keen to do a lot more of, especially as the kidlets get a bit older and I get a bit more time on my hands, which is starting to happen. And it's it's not like having to go away for 4 days hunting. You can get out there and do it in half a day and have a bit of fun, and it just makes it better when you get out there too. And I think that's a big part of a lot of hunters enjoy the shooting element of it. It's going to the range, sighting in, developing loads. There's so many elements, which is just awesome. So, but let's get back to Shooters Union because I am a member. I'm only recently joined because I was looking for an alternative. I just wasn't sort of super happy with who I was with and went, what value is out there and who is going to be really advocating for our group, because I've been critical of people in the past of not doing what I feel is enough to support our passion, hobby, lifestyle, whatever you want to call it. So, mate, can you just fill us in on what you guys have worked on, what you guys are currently now got offering and things like that, so our listeners know?
So like yourself, mate, I was a long-term member of other organisations, and I'll say organisations because it was more than a few. And I personally was feeling the same. I just didn't feel there was enough action going on. And also part of that, I felt that I couldn't complain if I wasn't going to be a part of the solution, which is where I kind of slipped into the board side of things. So where are we and what are we doing? Well, we're getting involved more than maybe other clubs might in different areas. And it's not to say that other clubs aren't involved in the fight. That's definitely not what I want to say here. But the way we're doing things is probably a little bit different and a little bit more strategic. Rather than being reactive to news of potential legislation changes, we're trying to get on top of it and be proactive. And one of the biggest things that the Shooters Union does is specifically goes into Parliament, engages with the lawmakers, and tries to present ourselves as what we are actually about, put a face to the problems and to the issue that's being brought up to them by other motivated groups, and kind of explain in plain talk what we're about, what we're doing, why we want to do it, and why they should continue to support us. Some of that comes down to saying, hey, we've got 4.5% of voters are shooters. And when you have 4.5% of voters in marginal seats, that sometimes may influence the way some of these people think. One thing I found in being around politicians is they're generally not that hard set on an idea. One of the biggest things I've noticed is a lot of them are worried about their jobs and what's going to keep them being voted. You could look at some of our key leaders. Their opinions 20 years ago on issues are very different to their opinions now. You know, that could be on, say, things like immigration. Same-sex marriage is a simple one, something that we see is so simple now. 20 years ago, some of these champions in Parliament were very different in their opinions. So I'd say that most of the politicians are actually quite persuaded by where they think the voter base is. And that's one of the biggest things we do is we remind people of a voter base, put a face to the voter base, and just discuss the issues. We don't discuss with single parties. We don't talk just to shooters, farmers, fishers as an example. We don't just speak to what would consider the far right. We speak to the far left. We speak to everyone. And that's definitely something different that we're doing. And our relationships is something different that we're doing that other organisations may not be as strong in. So that's one of our things that we do. Some of the things we've been definitely getting involved in as of late in New South Wales, and I can only really speak to this on New South Wales, and I guess a little bit to Victoria's issue with their national parks expansions. We've been talking to people about and consulting on the aerial culling in New South Wales. We've had members speak to Parliament specifically on this issue in question time and present some of the issues that we have with culling, aerial culling specifically. It's no hidden secret that aerial culling comes with some issues. We've seen footage of animals that haven't been effectively destroyed. We've seen footage of animals that have taken multiple rounds to be destroyed. And we've seen some questionable practices in other states, such as anchoring, which is as a shot fired from a shotgun to stop an animal with a follow-up aircraft or shooter providing a rifle shot. We don't think that's ethical. In everyone's hunting ethics books they go through in their various licensing, we are always taught one shot, one kill for an ethical harvest. And those are some of the things we've been advocating against. A part of our reason for advocating against that, taxpayer dollars. Massive volumes of taxpayer dollars are being spent on these programs, which we believe would be saved, and a revenue base would actually be raised if we had volunteer shooters, people who are willing to spend the money to get into these areas and not only be a part of the ethical management of invasive species, but also take some of the riches of that, be a good feed. We all love venison. I've told Brumby has flavour, may not be your thing. Goat, I definitely love a goat curry. That's definitely on the menu multiple times a month in my house. And also, you know, for the trophy hunter, there is also an element of a set of antler, of a nice hide. And these things definitely provide a memory of an experience. So there's more to it than just letting the volunteers have a shoot. There's definitely some bigger impacts. And as we know with the R license program, that generates money for the government. It really doesn't cost that much money to maintain the R license program, and it generates money. Could you imagine if that was expanded, how much better that would be? So we're definitely not opposed to professional shooters being employed, but we do believe where there is an appetite for volunteers and there is the capacity for volunteers to actually make an impact, that they should be used. With all that, we've definitely been consulting on some of the invasive species issues. We're not a fan of 1080 baiting. We believe it's indiscriminate. We cannot guarantee what species will be affected, despite what some of the media might suggest on this. A lot of us have seen 1080 baiting in our own council areas, and we've seen various native wildlife impacted. We've seen local dogs, impacted that domestic on a walk that's eaten the wrong thing, not the wild dog population. So we definitely don't have a strong opinion that it's a good thing, 1080 baiting, and we're quite against it. And again, we believe that a rifleman has the capacity to be a little bit more targeted in their impact if given the capacity to shoot in some of these areas. So that's definitely something that we've been speaking about. Another thing we've talked about is firearm safety testing. We don't want to see monopolies on firearm safety testing. We don't want to see the only organisation that happens to own a lot of clubs that have ranges be the only people that can deliver the testing. So far, riflemen in New South Wales been given a variety of testing options, be that through the DPI, be that through your local gun shop or the SSAA, aren't proving to be a risk to themselves or others. So we don't see a need for this to change. We're not seeing an increase in rifle-related incidents by the licensed firearm owner. So we don't see a need to change this. A system that's not broken, does not create a monopoly of who can run the training, we believe is better for the everyday punter. So that's something we've been definitely quite vocal on, and as yourself getting into this, potentially this side of things, there's some value in that, of keeping a variety of firearms testing options open. And another thing we've definitely started to talk about is consulting on the appearance laws and just some of the registry discrepancies. I think it's no secret that the National Registry is going to potentially cause some issues. Government is going ahead with that. I don't think there's anything we can do to stop that National Registry. But as we know, all of the different states and territories have some varying opinions on firearms and some of the specifics. We're probably not going to see the WA laws specifically on calibers, etc., spread. But some of the differences would be the appearance laws. Now, what some people don't realise is the 1996 laws make every state have to consider appearance laws. It's managed at a different threshold throughout the states. New South Wales being probably the most critical of that law, whereas other states are a little bit more loose on that, i.e. other states would say, if it's not an M4, it's not an M4. Whereas New South Wales says, well, if it looks like an M4 to the average punter, it probably can be considered under that law, which is why we have these discrepancies. So we're definitely starting to speak about that because we don't want to see other states impacted by these appearance laws. We don't want to see Australian industry that produces these amazing tools impacted by these laws. And pretty much every New South Wales firearms owner would love to shoot a couple of different options. We don't see a need for the restriction of collapsible stocks on a rifle that still exceeds minimum lengths. We don't see a need for a rifle that has somewhat similar aesthetics to an AR-15 band because it's somewhat similar. If it operates completely different and it operates like every other firearm that may come in a wood stock, then it's no different. So we want things to be judged on how they actually work, not how they appear. So those are some of the things that we've definitely been a lot more involved in of late, insides of the advocacy part of Shooters Union. But other things that we've been a part of is, and it'll come to light shortly, is developing a How to Hunt series, a production that's free to anyone. We don't care if you're not a member of Shooters Union. We want people to be out there enjoying the outdoors. So these things won't be limited in their access. Some of the things that we are doing is creating a lot of partnerships with big business. I can't name some of these yet because they haven't been formally announced, but we've got big businesses and small business that are really wanting to support what Shooters Union is about and are willing to offer Shooters Union members discounts, exclusive discounts. So we're going beyond just looking at what we can do for everyone, but we're trying to say we don't really care if you're with Shooters Union or with another agency, but there might be some perks to putting your money into our war chest to fight some of the battles that we will fight for your rights. Because as we know, campaigns cost money, media costs money, and we're all volunteers. We're not getting paid for what we do. So we do need some funds to fund our efforts to improve our image. So that's probably the main things that Shooters Union is currently about.
Look, there's a lot there to unpack, and I want to go through a couple of things. From the political side, I've said it before, and I continue to say it, and you mentioned the same, is that politicians are worried about their job, and their job relies on votes. You quoted, I think it was 4.3, 4.5%, somewhere around there.
Around that number in New South Wales.
Yeah, and that is significant, and especially, as you said, those marginal seats, and for those people that, are not really into politics, that swing and getting someone into power that doesn't align, they then have power and they have to horse trade or negotiate to get things across the floor and get the things they want passed approved. So that is a key thing for us. And I'm going to ask you a bit later about who are the parties that we should be looking at, because I did have a listener sort of ask us. He's a young fella, and he asked basically, and I should say shout out to Daniel for the message in regards to it about, I'm young, I really want to see this continue into the future. Who are the best people to vote for that have our best interests at heart? So we'll get into that one a bit later. But yeah, I constantly say about the politicians, yes, we need to make our voice heard and count and be proactive, because they're about their job. And you see that with the changes and the swings and their ideas changing. And as you said, there was staunch people against things 20 years ago. Now they're of a different opinion. And the other thing I'd say with politicians is a lot of them have no clue about certain topics. They are fed information, and it's like the average person that has no idea about firearms. I had one the other day. I had to giggle, I'm sorry, but I had a person, we're talking an adult person here, tell me that there's no guns in Australia. And I was like, pardon? And they're like, yeah, no, Australian laws, we don't have any guns here. And I giggled and I pulled out my firearms license and said, so what's this? Oh. So hold on, you've got guns. And to me, I had to giggle, because I was like, sometimes if it's not in your wheelhouse, if it's not something you're interested in and follow, that's the opinion that they just don't know. So whilst some politicians might be against what we're doing, it might be actually because they're not educated on what we're offering. So that's a big one. I see that as very valuable from what you guys are doing there with that sort of educating and not just going for one party, going for across the board to inform people. I think that's really, really important. The other one, I've been having a long conversation with someone that took exception to a video I shared of an aerial cull where the animal was shot in the back and obviously didn't die straight away. And after discussing it, he was obviously of the opinion that I was against cullers and professional shooters, and quite the opposite. I think they are definitely required and I support them. I don't like the aerial culling side, and I'm not a big fan of it because I don't think it is ethical. I don't think it is as good as having a support on the grounds. And his opinion differed, and he's entitled to that opinion. I don't see how that works, but again, everyone's entitled to what they think. For me, I just don't want to see too much aerial culling, because I think I'm about a humane kill for the animal. I don't want to see anything suffer. Yes, there's a job to do. Get it. Get on some farms, they're in big numbers. And we definitely need to manage those numbers, especially just talking about deer, but pigs and everything as well. So it's important to do all those things. And, I was talking to a mate today, shout out to Gary. I wanted to get him on, but he's got a thick Irish accent. He knows who he is. He went away and they got into the pigs over the last 3 days, and I think they got close to 100. So that's a big number. The farmer was happy. He's not a professional culler. but that's significant. I sort of see the opportunity, and I love what you were saying there about the shooters who aren't professional getting out there and getting opportunities, and then linking to the national parks. And as you said, state foresting has been going bloody great. It earns a heap of money. Why can't we expand that? How many politicians know that the R licence system knows how much money's out there? So there's so many elements there as well. So I liked a lot of what you were saying there. I think it resonates with me definitely. And that's probably why I joined you guys, to be honest, because one of the other things I think is that there's so many groups out there at the moment that they might be isolated in states or territories, and then it's not the bigger picture. I'm not saying that we don't need them, but I think that old saying of too many chefs spoil the broth, I sometimes think that's very valid, because that's a lot of different money going to different organisations instead of a couple of big ones to use that more strategically, have more power behind it because there's more money in the pot. Like you were just saying, you guys are volunteers, you're doing a fair bit, but you rely on support from members. So all those things are really good. Loving hearing that stuff. I've loved what you guys are doing, and you mentioned or alluded to it that, you know, I've signed up through you guys to do my R licence and firearms licence accreditation so I can deliver the courses and try and grow our numbers. That's one of the, you know, I preach it on the podcast, so I'd be a hypocrite if I wasn't doing something to try and actively do that. I guess for me, you guys are doing a lot of good things. What are you doing from the lobbying side? So you touched on it before, and how does that work? And there's been a bit of things in the news at the moment regarding how lobbying works and the money behind it and things like that. Can you touch on a bit of that for us to explain to people that might not understand it or know?
Yeah, so it's quite a complex area how lobbying works, and there's quite a lot of layers to lobbying and the various levels of lobbying and what's seen as okay and not okay. I think it's no surprise to many that there may be some legal practices done in Parliament that may border on the unethical side of things. As we've seen, a big focus lately is on how a lot of companies seem to be able to extort resources and pay very little tax and provide very little back to the Australian, despite it being Australian resources that are being utilised. A lot of that comes from lobbying. You have motivated groups of well-organised individuals who make themselves very friendly with particular politicians. And whilst it's probably not, it's nowhere near as bad as it is in the US, it's definitely a thing. And you know, there's been some recent studies showing some quite influential groups. As an example, the Pharmacy Guild of Australia. Pharmacists do an amazing job, and there's no argument from me as a health professional in my professional life that pharmacists do an amazing thing for society, and they are a big part of reducing the impacts to the health services. However, Pharmacy Guild provides a fair bit of money and support to politicians, and with that, we have seen recent legislative changes that allow pharmacists to do more, to get more access to government funding for various programs. And I don't disagree with a lot of those programs, but pharmacy itself is, in most cases, a private business. So the individual and the organisation, the Pharmacy Guild of Australia, by investing in politicians, seems to gain from the politicians. And that's just one example. And again, I'm not specifically targeting them as an organisation. They are just been recently released in publications to be a big contributor. So, and they're an easy one to explain to the general punter. So lobbyists do exist. Lobbyists are definitely around. They're influencing your politicians, and a lot of them go unchecked in how they do business because they're not required to record who they are or why they have unvetted access to your local members. So we understand that, and we see it as a strategical decision that we need to play by the rules of others. If the rules of others say that you can go and speak to a politician in their offices, we believe that we would be silly not to be doing the same thing. Now, there's no lies here. Shooters Union does not have the money to financially influence or guide. We do not go to Parliament with gifts, despite what some of these politicians may expect from us. We go there open with the fact that we've got a problem, that you're our member, that we have the the expectation that you'll at least hear us out on our issues. And in most cases, most of these politicians love to actually speak to us. And as I said, from the far left all the way to the far right and all in the middle, we speak to everyone and we share our experience. We tell them why they need us and ask them how we might be able to help them as well. Because we have, as I said, 4.5% voter base. So if issues that they may see as important, we can also pass as potentially something that we see as also important, i.e. Things about four-wheel driving, things about fishing, although not shooting related specifically, we'll pass those around and we'll advocate for those issues as well, because those are things that our members care about. We're just playing by the same rules that everyone else has, except we're not going in there with a war chest of a lot of money. So whilst we're not necessarily lobbying by its textbook definition, we're doing a lot of the same background, if that answers the question.
Yeah, it does. I think for me, the whole lobbying thing, I saw a quote, I think it was from Robin Williams, and he said that he'd love it if politicians were like NASCAR drivers and they had to wear a suit with all the people that sponsor them. And that would make a lot of sense. I'm with you on what you were saying about the Pharmacy Guild. They do a lot of good things. So whilst, yes, lobbying occurs, sometimes it's not actually detrimental. There's a lot of positives that come out of it too. And you're right that if other people are doing it and are playing by that rule, there's no reason we shouldn't be. Now, it is a shame that I'd say it's almost like a handicap, not having funds to provide gifts or donations and the things that do occur from other groups. But, I mean, that's the reality of the world, and hopefully one day Shooters Union will grow in numbers and be able to be in a position to be able to play on a fair footing with some of the other groups out there. So I get where you're coming from there. While saying that, you obviously can still make a difference by educating, talking, and it's, that's important too. And I do think votes speak a bit more than money, because at the end of the day, you might give a gift to a politician or whatever it might be. But if they don't get re-elected because the fan base changes, and let's be real, it's a popularity contest for them to get re-elected. And then there's obviously the party systems and who gives preferences and all that sort of stuff. But the reality is it's a popularity contest. So there's a lot more influence in that side of it because people want to keep their jobs. No one wants to get fired. No one wants to lose their job and not know where the next paycheck's coming from and the like. So that is a key role. So, yeah, no, you did a pretty good job of going through that. Now, for people that are not 100% sure of who they should be sort of voting for or looking to, like Daniel, what advice would you give? Is there parties that are more beneficial to our way of life?
Yeah, so I'd like to start answering this question by pretty much saying if you are not interested in politics, you are gambling away not only your recreation, but every part of your way of life. Now, I don't want to be a 31-year-old who is interested in politics, I promise you, and my wife definitely doesn't want me interested in politics at like the level I'm at. But you have to be invested, because I can tell you now the people opposing your way of life are invested. It's easy to pick on the hard left. The hard left has a very active, vocal group that actively recruit and educate their theory onto their people very well. They are excellent at it, and they indoctrinate. And that's what it is. It's speaking in plain talk, that's exactly what it is. They are very good at it and very effective at it. And we wish to utilise some of the same practices for our means. So if you're not involved in politics or interested, that's a problem. And you should really address that if you really want to keep this sport going. Now, politicians are dynamic, all right? As I said, their stance today is not necessarily their stance tomorrow. And there's no guarantee that the stance they go into an election with is obviously where they're going to end with. So you have to do your homework. Now, it's a hard thing to say that because I'm not really giving you an answer that you'd like. As a general rule, I have found the minority parties to be the most favoursome. They definitely look towards the individual because they are looking for the marginal votes. As I said, it's all about numbers, and they only need a certain amount of numbers to get a seat. They know they're not going to have a majority in the Senate, as an example. But they know that if they can get 2 or 3 people into the Senate, they can have a balance of power when votes need to happen. And I think they're more potent to have independents and, you know, the minor parties in places like the Senate than it is to worry about anything else. I also think it's important to people understand that the major parties, generally, the politicians within them, will have to toe the party line. If the party line is anti-firearms, as an example, generally they will toe that line. So as an example, the Liberals introduced the 1996 laws, all right? They'll massively promote it as Howard's biggest achievement, all right? And they generally are going to still stick by firearms laws. Now, whilst they may be a little bit willing to bend here and there, and they're generally quite supportive of, I'd say, reasonable legislation and reasonable changes, they still will hold that firm stance that the 1996 decision was a good decision. So you're probably not going to be able to swing a vote in your favour from them. However, One Nation, as an example, previously had a police officer as one of their members. That police officer has used firearms in his employment, understands the value of firearms in society in regards to, you know, their actions around hunting, you know, sport, etc. So he naturally has, or had, he's no longer in that party at the moment, a affinity towards firearms. So he would push some of our opinions and our points across to other people. Another example is one of our great supporters, Mr. Roy Butler. He's a farmer. He's an ex-infantryman. He understands firearms. He's all about the legal use of firearms. So naturally, a man who shoots himself is going to support us. So we obviously love to, where we can, promote Roy. He's a great ambassador of the sport. So you have to do your research. I'm not able to say specifically who, because who I might say today, i.e. I might say today that the One Nation is a great candidate, or the Libertarian Party is a great option. That could change in 12 months' time. So it's going to be dynamic. It's going to be shifting. What you'll probably will see as we get close to elections, as has been done in the past, we'll provide closer to the dates our guides of who we think should be your preference list. Who has said to us at a time of the election race what they actually think about firearms. And firearms fishing, four-wheel driving, etc. As I said, we're going to go broader on the topic. We're not just going to narrow ourselves down on firearms. So that's probably the answer if it's a bit of a runaround, but I hope I've kind of given a reason why the runaround answers there, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And it's not just as simple as saying this party, go for them. I was lucky enough to interview Mark Latham before the election last time and talk about the policy he had on national parks, on shooting, four-wheel driving, all that, which was to open up the national parks for shooters, to promote our way of life, that he was in full support of it. And I've said on the podcast, Mark's not a shooter. I don't think he has any interest in hunting or anything like that, but it was an opportunity to get numbers, especially with SFFP being in a bit of a disarray with people leaving like Phil Donato and the like. So it was a play, but I do believe One Nation are quite supportive right up the ranks as well. So that's really positive from that side. Now, you do have to look, and if you're not, you should get over to Facebook, Instagram, whatever, and follow Shooters Union, because as Patrick just said, when it comes time, and they're coming up, there's quite a few coming up, and we will be pretty active as voters in the next 12 months, I believe. So you need to be aware of who, and that will give you that sort of cheat sheet, which is super important because, yes, politics can be a dry topic, and I'm the same. A lot of people don't want to talk about it. I think it's a need, because if you're not doing anything about it and you're not using your vote accordingly, you can't complain when things don't go your way. So that's the beauty and I guess the negative of a democracy as well, the majority rules, and that's how power is used. So yeah, mate, you did a pretty good job answering that one. It is a very difficult, direct question to answer, so I get that. I just talked about Mark coming on and talking about national parks, and you touched on it earlier in the podcast, talking about Victoria and what I think is an absolute travesty of what they're trying to do down there, turning a lot of good, usable land that's currently being accessed into national parks. Are we seeing more of that across the different states, especially here in New South Wales? And look, I appreciate we got listeners from all over the place, but New South Wales is obviously where I live and where I, get out and about. So that's the one I sort of focus on a lot. But is there much on the horizon there at the moment?
Yeah, there absolutely is, and it's concerning based off the current legislation for shooters and hunters specifically. So in New South Wales, there already has been a transition of state parks into national parks over the last year, I believe it's been. And the reason is it's an easy way to buy your carbon points, all right? Like if you swap it across to national parks, that puts you in the positive. So it's one of the reasons why it's been done. The main parks that have been affected are very low use parks. They're not major thoroughfares at the moment. But that's not to say that's not going to change. And I guess the litmus test to all this is exactly what's happening in Victoria with their major national park proposal. Victoria, in the last few years, has had some pretty drastic changes, specifically around their timber industry, native timber industry. The way you can use national parks and some of the proposals to change. Now, Victoria, as many of the East Coast listeners would be aware, is unique. You can hunt in some national parks. It's some of the greatest sambar hunting, some of the greatest four-wheel driving. The Victorian High Country, as much as I hate to say it as a proud origin of New South Wales, is that it is amazing country down there, and it is some of the best, hardest, most challenging and rewarding hunting you'll ever do, chasing sambar in the high country. And that's unique. The national parks has been allowed. And legislation does actually allow it if the governments tweak things. So it's already there. New South Wales, as you're aware, we cannot hunt in the national parks. We are limited to the state forests. So the transition of land is a big deal. And as I said, some of these parks that have already been transitioned are quite, they're more remote, so it's not really been a big issue. And I think it'll slowly happen if it's not challenged, like a slow growing cancer. But what's happening in Victoria, if that passes and gets the main vote of society, I wouldn't put it off happening in New South Wales. And the reason why I guess that's so concerning in Victoria is these are parks that are really close to Melbourne. These are parks that I've hunted in myself. They're great locations. They are close. They create an accessibility to Victorians that are in the city. They don't isolate those people who are, living in Melbourne from still having those regional pursuits like forward driving, prospecting, hunting, fishing, etc. So if it does change and does shift, it sets a litmus test to the majority Labor government across the nation that they could probably do this in other places. And it's definitely not something we want to see in New South Wales. So it's something that we're definitely challenging.
I think I've said it on the podcast a few times previously. My major concern when something gets up in a different state is that politicians out there, their ears perk up and go, "Oh, that had the support of the people. It hasn't had that much blowback. It's been supported really strongly. Is that in my area? Can I implement it?" And that's a major concern because it's an easy one to see. And this is my big one with the National Feral Deer Action Plan that was pushed forward and things like that, is if the narrative and if people are supporting it and there's this push for it, it's just so easy to then bring it up and propose it because there's evidence, whether you agree with the evidence or not, there's evidence there to be able to say, hey, this is what I'm going to do. And especially if it hasn't been had, if it's had the support and the numbers, again, it comes back to voting power. It comes back to numbers for people to get elected. And they are always looking for reasons to get elected. And if something is that they can introduce and be the champion of that happens in different states, why recreate the wheel? They can just grab it, manipulate it maybe not even manipulate it and just say, hey, here it is as is, we should put this in. And that's scary. And I think, as you said, if we start to see that and we start to see more national parks that we can't access and use and it slowly gets chipped away, it becomes harder and harder. And we're in a catch-22, I believe. The more numbers you have, the better. So the more shooters out there, the better, and shooters and hunters. But if there's no more land and you're increasing those hunters' numbers, there's more hunting pressure, there's more less access. I know a couple of forests I like to go to, I struggle to get into now. So that is one of those conundrums, isn't it, of trying to find that happy medium or that right balance. And it's one that I always sort of have the argument is that we don't need diehard hunters, everyone. We don't need everyone to be wanting to be out there for 300 days a year. We need the mix. It's great we have those blokes who are super passionate, get out there and do a great job. But it's also great that the guys that go out once a year and have fun with their family and friends, because they're still doing what we love. They're a number. They're influencing others, hopefully in a positive way. That's all positive as far as I'm concerned. All right, so, geez, we've covered a lot. Like, I'm looking at the time going, my God, we could probably go a lot more in depth and a heap more topics, but I'm mindful that people's time is valuable, and I struggle to listen to myself when I edit. So, I still don't understand why people listen to my annoying voice. But let's talk about how hunters, shooters, outdoor lovers out there can help you guys, because I think that's important. As you touched on, you don't get paid. You're a volunteer, which I really appreciate. Like, it takes a lot to do that and give up time, which, as I said, is super valuable. So I appreciate all the people out there that do give up their time for what we love. So thank you for that, firstly. But then how can people like myself or just the everyday hunter just get involved to help out or support Shooters Union?
So there's definitely a few different tiers of how people can help support, the firearms shooting community in Australia and New South Wales. By far, the biggest thing that anyone can do is, if you are already a firearms owner, is recruit other firearms owners or hunters, etc. The biggest one, and I guess the one that we're specifically trying to target, is if your wife or girlfriend or significant other, boyfriend, husband, is not a shooter and you are, why aren't they? It's an easy person to bring into the sport, and we all know that shared interests help relationships. All right, they help your relationship to a degree because you've now got an extra bit of budget that you can put into your hobby. All right, if your missus is a shooter, it's not as hard to sell buying that extra firearm. It's not as hard to sell that extra fishing rod that you want to buy. It's not that hard to sell that weekend away with the family where you sneak off and do a bit of a hunt. So I'm a big fan of, if your significant other isn't a firearms owner or isn't a shooter, a licensed shooter, and you are, and this is a big part of your life, probably should bring them into the fold.
Can I just add to that? I like to be proactive and plan ahead. And if your partner hasn't got their firearms license and something was to happen to you, what happens to all those guns? Now, I will personally, I don't want to admit this on air because my wife does listen, but I spent a lot more than she thinks on my firearms. And it's like that meme that, my greatest fear in life is my wife selling all my firearms for what I told her I paid for them. But in all seriousness, that is a concern of mine, because I'd love to see my rifles handed down to my children. Now, if something was to happen to me and my partner didn't have their firearms license, that opens up a massive can of worms, and there's some issues there. So that is a big one. So I definitely just wanted to add that for people out there thinking, yeah, okay, but it's an extra cost. Well, I mean, it's pretty damn hard if you got to get rid of firearms, not licensed. There's just so much more to lose, in my opinion.
It's not hard to have $20,000, $30,000, $50,000 worth of firearms. And that's not even... I
don't have that, honey. I don't have that.
And that's not even going over the top and buying, exotic custom-built rifles. It just, things do add up. So on that side of things, if something was to happen to yourself, that kind of at least eliminates that issue straight off the bat. Another part that eliminates the issue off the bat is if you go hunting with your family and you're in the state forest for a weekend, if you're the only firearms license holder, you've now added a bit of a difficulty in how you store those firearms. All right, so there's a little bit of an issue there that if you are both firearms licensed and you walked away from the camp for whatever reason and they're in the truck, and your wife was potentially spoken to by the local police or the DPI, there would be no trouble. There would be no question in it. So from that side of things, that it just makes sense. But it makes sense that we target a area that is probably already got an affinity towards it because of their significant other. And it's an easy way to boost numbers. As you might be aware, in New Zealand, there was a lot of legislation post the terrorist incident that was rapidly rushed through, championed off our Australian 1996 laws. A lot of those laws have been overturned because one of the key differences to Australia is New Zealand has around 10% of their voting population of firearms owners, and culturally a much higher appreciation of hunting within their society. So that shows that things can be reversed with numbers. So, basic maths, if we're currently 4.5%, let's assume that, half of our listeners here, their partners aren't firearms owners. And that would say potentially speak for the rest of the licensed firearm owners. That's overnight, we've moved into the 7% mark of firearms owners just by bringing your partner in. Now you add to that, you bring a mate at work that's been interested in hunting and seeing what you do, or seeing you at the range. It's not hard to double, triple, and even quadruple our numbers. And without being scaring individuals into thinking, oh crap, overnight we could be 20% of the population owning firearms. It's really, that wouldn't be that hard to achieve. So I think the big thing I'd like to see, and I think everyone would like to see, is just recruitment. I know personally I used to push for 1 a year. Now, being obviously in it, I push for 10 to 15 people a year. Doing the licensing myself, I'd love to see more because there's a financial gain to me bringing more people into it. But definitely that'd be one of the first things I'd like to see. The next line of things that I think people can do is be really careful about social media. Social media is a blessing and a curse. It gives you global access, but it also gives you the capacity to run your mouth in the wrong way, and I'm absolutely guilty of it all the time myself. We are ambassadors for this sport. Every single individual who shoots and presents themselves on the social media as a shooter. We can't have people abusing people who have alternate views to us. We can't have people belittling people for their vegetarian lifestyle. Whilst I was a vegetarian, as I said this, I had an issue with the meat industry. Shooting came out of a necessity to harvest my own meat ethically and live a healthier lifestyle. Not every vegetarian is going to stay a vegetarian. A famous example is Bear Grylls. He was a vegetarian, now he's a carnivore, and a proud carnivore. So don't isolate people, don't be aggressive towards people, be an ambassador, explain why you're in the sport or the recreation, and promote in a positive light. The same goes when you present yourself to the police. The police are on our side. They actually don't have an issue with licensed firearm owners. They know we're not the problem. They know the outlaw motorcycle clubs and the criminal underworld is the problem. When they come to do a safe inspection, be polite. There's no reason to put these people off. They're not paid that well, all right? They've got a hard enough job. They usually deal with people that are absolute pricks to them most of the day. So just be friendly. Follow the rules. You will have no trouble. If they are giving you grief, just understand they probably have had a horrific day or a horrific week dealing with other things, and just let it be water off a duck's back. Be polite, be an ambassador at all times. And the third tier is if you are an unfortunate sucker like me that want to get off the fence, please reach out to the Shooters Union board and ask to help. We have so many tasks and activities that we can that we definitely need assistance on. So there's lots of layers to helping, but the main things: recruit and present well to the rest of society.
I'll further that. I have a couple of mates that are coppers, and I definitely would not want to be in their position and do their job. If you think about it, who you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis regularly, it's not the good people in society. I can understand why some are in a crappy mood. Like, you're not dealing with good people generally. You're dealing with people who have done the wrong thing and don't want to take any accountability for it as well. So completely understand that. And the social media thing is so big. And look, it's one I've said previously, image is everything. And we need to be mindful. I implore everybody out there to be mindful of what you are putting out into the world, because that is what is so important. Be well spoken. Don't be aggressive towards people. People have different views, and thank God for that. Let's be real. I'd hate to live in a society that there was one point of view and that was it. Just because I believe a certain thing doesn't mean I'm correct, and vice versa. So I think tolerance is a big message out there for people too, is that there's no need. And, you win over more people being nice than being a prick. And I have definitely been on social media in hunting groups, shooting groups, and even animal activist groups. Scroll on is one of my big things, is you're not going to change opinions by getting on there and telling someone they're wrong. Do you like to be told you're wrong? Probably not. No, I don't think anyone does. That's not the way to go about it. So I think it's just too easy on social media for people to just engage in that back and forth arguing, and no one's going to win. It's just one of those things. You're better off being polite. You're better off just going, yep, you have a difference of opinion. That's cool. Happy to have a decent conversation about it. And hey, if they're not polite to you, that's cool. They're not representing our community. I'd rather have someone that's of a different opinion to me blast the crap out of me publicly because they look like the tool, and I am not going to engage with that person because I understand the value of having a good image to promote what we do in a positive manner. And I think that's a massive one that we need people to understand and promote. We need good people in this, and the majority of law-abiding firearms owners are that. And, we can all get swept up into social media in the heat of the moment. Take a breath, have a think about it. Don't press send. Don't hit that post button. Sleep on it, cool down, and then go, is this the best thing that I need to do? And we're all guilty of it. I tend to like to sleep on things so that I don't react and have that emotional thing. But hey, that's just part of it. So there's one thing from me. I definitely think that's a good message out there. All right, let's talk there's a couple of things before we wrap up. Can we talk about the membership costs and benefits so people have that understanding of it?
Yeah, so membership is pretty cheap. It's $48 in New South Wales. That's probably one of the cheapest memberships out there. It has to be, I have to caveat this and just remind people that insurance is different and it's a separate thing. All right, your membership to us specifically is to be a part of the advocacy and organisation and to gain access to being a part of an approved hunting club and a genuine reason in New South Wales. And I'm not going to speak to the other states purely because I'm not the expert on the other states. But those are the two things that in New South Wales. And pretty much everyone, bar a very small minority, have all been with us for our R license specifically, or just the general advocacy part of the organisation. There's a few that are coming on to us for the genuine reason part, and that's awesome. There are other regulatory issues, i.e. you need to conduct events with us, which we'll get into as we announce those things later on. But by having your AHO, so by using Shooters Union as your AHO for your R license carries with it your insurance. So the reason why we don't charge insurance within our $48 is because you've already probably got insurance with your R license. So why double dip if you've already got it? If you don't have it, then that's a separate fee, and I don't quote me on the numbers there, but it's not that much extra. So that's what you get. We don't have shirts, we don't have hats, we don't have anything fancy on the merchandise side of things at the moment. There's a desire to go down that route to make money for Shooters Union. However, as I said, we're a volunteer board. We all got professional careers. It's a little bit hard to do that. We're not like SSAA that has a full corporate structure with multiple paid employees. We'd love to be there, but we're just not there yet. So that's pretty much what your membership will get you. As I said, $48, pretty cheap. What it will give you, as I said, we're talking about partnerships with other businesses. So some of our partnerships with industries, I guarantee every shooter has purchased from. So 5 to 10% off these places. We have deals coming with multiple gun shops in Sydney where they will offer exclusive deals to our members. And as I said, firearms can cost upwards of $3,000 or $4,000 quite quickly. So 5 to 10% savings, I think your membership pretty much pays for itself, doesn't it? So that's definitely where the membership goes there.
My rifles were definitely nowhere near $3,000, just putting it out there just for my wife. And further to that, insurance. There's been, and we've been talking about, well, social media's popped up and insurance has popped up. There was multiple posts going around about an issue with insurance for inland hunting properties. And for a lot of people like myself, I've used them in the past because, private access is hard to come by and I have no issue with people paying for properties. But there was something going around saying that you guys weren't covered. I think Inland Hunting Properties posted that and Shooters Union came back and said, I think that was correct. Can you elaborate just a little bit on that? Because I know I've been asked the question many times and I'm not 100% on it.
Yeah, so absolutely. Please don't quote me on these exact specifics on this issue. Inland Hunting Properties did absolutely release a publication that Shooters Union could no longer be utilised as your proof of insurance. Specifically, even if you were paying for that extra insurance component with your membership. That was not a decision by Shooters Union to drop that. That is a decision by the insurer who put it into the PDS that they said no longer would they cover inland hunting properties. That was a decision based off a range of claims and the decision that to continue to provide coverage to inland hunting properties, it would dramatically increase the cost of our premiums. Now, if our premiums were to go up significantly, noting that we don't actually have that many organisations that will insure firearms owners in hunting pursuits, you would naturally see a massive cost change in your membership and it would no longer be valuable for you to stay with us and you'd probably go to another organisation. So we decided that it was best to make mention that Shooters Union itself did not cover it. The other part of that is Inland Hunting Properties operates as a business. I think everyone's aware of that most businesses require their own insurance. As the example I've used elsewhere, if you were to go to a paintball arena, the paintball arena would have insurance. Inland Hunting Properties is asking you to provide the insurance, and our insurer, I believe, wasn't overly happy with that arrangement as well, which I think people can understand when they see that. With Inland Hunting Properties, if you are a Shooters Union member and you do have an R licence, however, I do believe, and I will clarify this, that your R licence with the DPI, with the $20 million of insurance with that, will still cover you to go on Inland Hunting Properties. So just because you're a Shooters Union member does not mean you're instantly excluded. There's just some niche things. It's also important to remember that the insurance broker that we utilise is probably the same insurance broker that many clubs utilise. So it wouldn't surprise me if other clubs are in the same boat as we are, with Inland Hunting Properties being excluded or their premiums getting rapidly risen. As I said, that's not our decision. That's not our specific... we didn't say to knock them off. We didn't have an issue with Inland Hunting Properties, and I think I've provided a decent workaround of how people can still get onto Inland Hunting Properties. They are a business that has a unique access, and I have got nothing against them, or neither does anyone really in Shooters Union. This was a decision by the insurer, and we've just had to live with that decision by the insurer.
It's interesting because one of my good mates is in insurance, has his own business for it, and talking to him about insuring shooters and hunters, because it's obviously with firearms being on properties, there is a lot of risk involved, and that not many insurers are really wanting to take that risk or get involved. So it's a very small amount of companies that are willing to insure. So it's not, I don't think people realise that in the background, that you might only have one or two choices, because the way insurance works, as he explained to me, and I'm no expert and happy to be proven wrong here, but he basically said that unless they're going to be making a lot of money coming in from payments, that they're not going to be willing to insure because of the risk of having to pay out. So it needs to be a viable option for them to cover their costs, and if they can't do that, then it's not something they're looking at. So unless you're going to have a lot of people jumping over to a new insurance company that's willing to underwrite it or whatever they call it, it's probably not going to happen. So you're better off sticking with whoever are doing the insurance, because it's just an easy way, and they're not really going to, put their neck on the chopping block as a new insurer. So happy to be proven wrong, but that's pretty much how he explained it to me, and that's his area of expertise. So, alrighty. Well, we've covered a lot. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast, Patrick. thank you for your time. As you said, you're a volunteer for Shooters Union, and I appreciate you giving up your time to get on here and have a chat. And I guess for me, keep up the great work. I really would love to have you back on, especially as we get more pressing things come up, and especially towards election time and things like that, so people know. So, mate, you got an open invitation to come back on from my end, and thank you very much.
Mate, I really appreciate the opportunity to give a bit of an example of what we're about, what we're doing, and where we're going. As I said, I understand that people may not feel that Shooters Union is specifically for them. That's fine. We're still going to fight in the background for your rights. But, we'd love to see our membership grow because it opens up our capacity with the war chest getting a little bit more funding. And I definitely, if the invitation's there, you'll see me in 6 or so months as elections start to ramp up, even just for a rapid debrief of where we are and where we're going and what we need shooters to be thinking about going into those elections.
Mate, I love it. Guys, I'll put all the links in the show notes. So if you're not a member of Shooters Union, definitely have a strong, hard look at them, doing really good things. As I said, I'm a member, so I definitely am keen for that supporter base to grow, and I've had a couple of mates get over there already as well. So, all right, guys, bye for now.
If you have a topic, guest, question, or any gear that you want to hear about on the podcast, shoot us an email, australianhuntingandbeyond@gmail.com. Alternatively, find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All the links are in the show notes. If you haven't already, make sure you give us a review and subscribe to our podcast on whatever platform you're listening on. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you next time.